Hello everyone, welcome back to Morgan Hasn't Seen. It is the start of a brand new series on this show, and I'm very excited about it, Jeannine, because it is a bucket list one.
Yeah.
That has been a carryover from our milestone special for 250 episodes of Morgan Hasn't Seen that we did last January. Not last month, last January, which was a long time ago now and has taken us this long to fit in this particular movie we're covering today. But really, it had to come all-encompassing with its own series, didn't it? I think, given that it is a trilogy, and we're throwing an extra little Richard Linklater movie in there as well, in rather exciting fashion. I'm very happy. I'm very excited. I want to get into it. It's been a movie I've wanted to watch for a long time. I've been told countless times how great and powerful and meaningful and so unbelievably profound and emotional this is as a romance movie, as a romantic movie. That naturally I felt incredibly, I actually felt like I was missing out not watching this movie, because I consider myself somebody that enjoys this kind of thing, that enjoys delving into the romantic side of the world and the romantic side of life in every facet. So what is it about the Before trilogy, and maybe in particularly Before Sunrise, that captures people? Let's find out, I guess. I mean, what does this movie mean to you? Is this one that you had particular fondness for?
I mean, not necessarily. Like, this is actually one that I ended up watching fairly late. Like, I think I actually ended up watching the full trilogy. I think I'd seen the first film a couple of times, but I hadn't seen the full trilogy. So I hadn't watched the full trilogy, the other two films, until I think maybe 2 years ago was when I actually finally watched all three films back to back to back. But yeah, I mean, in terms, I think, of 90s films, a movie like this is definitely your vibe, I would say. Because I think we've discovered that on the show, you've missed quite a bit of the 90s. So if you were going to watch anything in the 90s, I would think this would be a film that you would gravitate towards. But generally,
I mean, look, not anymore. I don't feel like I've missed a lot of the 90s anymore, in truth.
No, but I mean, old Morgan.
Very well caught up.
Yes. But for me, this film just really harkens back to the thought of kind of something I can relate to, in the sense of you having an opportunity to do something and it's a little bit crazy and you kind of aren't sure, but you have this gut feeling that if you don't do it, you're going to regret it.
Yeah.
And I've been there before. And so whenever I watch this film, it kind of takes me back to particular moments where I've been in those situations where you kind of just actually let your whims just take you to a certain thing, and good or bad, you create this really interesting memory that stays with you, and I love that about this. And I also love that it gives me sensibilities of One Perfect Day movies, or one day where two people kind of connect so deeply over the course of one day. Because I think, when you're spending that much intimate time with a person, just for even what seems like a small amount of time, if you are continuously talking and revealing things and having experiences in that time, it could really feel like you really know a person in a short period of time. So, it reminds me of things like Dogfight, which is a favorite one-day romantic film, or Roman Holiday, which is my favorite kind of one-day romantic film.
I was just going to bring up Roman Holiday, as I think it's a movie you can reasonably easily compare to Before Sunrise, I think, in terms of attitude and almost profundity. Again, this sort of very, very introspective kind of just two people on a journey together movie. Nobody
Yeah.
else matters at all.
Yeah,
You know,
it's completely
particularly in Before
concentrated.
Sunrise.
Yeah.
Yeah, particularly in Before Sunrise, literally nobody matters at all. Like, there's literally not another named cast member in the movie. They're
Yeah.
just random characters that come in, maybe, you know, for a palm reading or to write a poem, or that they
Yeah.
happen to meet once in the street or something like
Uh-huh.
that. So in that sense, comparing it to Roman Holiday, it's even smaller and more intimate than something like that.
Yeah.
But in its spontaneous attitude, it is very, very similar. And in its ultimate, can we really be together attitude, obviously Roman Holiday is a little bit more finalized in that
Yeah.
sense, as a no, we can't, but thank you for this time.
Yes, it's a very smile
This,
because it happened kind of thing with
yeah,
the Roman holiday.
this is open-ended. And obviously, I think it's so important because I think my entire feelings towards this movie simply come from the fact that I don't know what comes in Before Sunset. I've no concept of Before Sunset or Before Midnight. I don't know what happens. So I may say things in this that you, as an avid Before Trilogy fan, may be thinking, well, that it just doesn't make sense why you would think that, because you know what happens. But I don't. So I have to come into this, and I'm sure I may end up thinking about Before Sunrise in a completely different light after having watched Sunset and Midnight, right?
Yeah.
Who knows? Who's to say? I'm looking forward to getting there. But I think there's two ways you can watch Before Sunrise, I think. One is the stunningly cynical way, which I find potentially quite funny. Thankfully, wasn't how I ended up watching the movie. I feel like I ended up watching this movie with real sincerity within myself, and you know, a belief that what was going on was impactful, was meaningful, and did make me personally start to think about things like that, because I don't tend to be the most spontaneous person. I think it's something occasionally I struggle with. However, I am more than capable of going on trips around random places on my own, which is exactly what this movie's about, and just finding out what to do and just deciding what to do on a whim on the day, which may be spontaneous to an extent.
Yeah.
But I think there's conversations about that sort of thing within this movie. There's conversations about the benefit of spontaneity compared to kind of practical planning that happen in this movie, that develop over the course of this movie with these two characters, obviously. That did admittedly make me start thinking, and that's what exactly the kind of thing I wanted to get from the Before movies, and I suppose particularly Before Sunrise, because it's the beginning, because it's the start, because it's the one people mention the most. I'm more aware of this movie than I am of the other two. I had somewhat reference to Before Sunrise before having watched it. There's going to be a lot of before words going on in this episode, but I was aware of certain scenes even in this movie that I literally can't state enough how unaware of Sunset and Midnight I am. Truly, I have no concept of what happens, but had some concept of what happens in this movie. Just didn't quite know how it would come about, what the conversations would be, exactly what would be the attitude of everything. Which is what I find interesting about it. Going back to my point of different types of watching Before Sunrise, the type I chose to watch it is with this sincere heart, this sincere mind, which I think is the best way. You can also watch it in the cynical mind, and the cynical mind tells you, well, this is just going to be every 22-year-old traveler's favorite movie, isn't it? Because this is just all like,
who goes backpacking across Europe.
Well, exactly. Backpacking across Europe. We're
Yeah.
just going to be
Taking a
freewheeling, free
semester
loving.
off. Yeah.
Oh, exactly. We're just going to be free loving, free wheeling, just going off, doing whatever we want. No responsibilities. Throw them all out. Run around. Have some fun. Vomit, vomit, vomit. You can watch it like that if you
Yeah.
really want to. You can watch it like that. It's not a very nice way, I think, of watching it,
Yeah.
but you could watch it in this. Look at these two. They haven't got a clue about the real world. They haven't got a clue about the hardships of actual life. They're on
Yeah.
a
They really
whim.
think they're gonna
Just
keep this up after the fact, yeah.
exactly. And every so often they tell themselves, we can't keep this up after this, can we? No, I don't think we can. And then they keep going back to thinking they actually can. And then by the end, they're like, kind of sure they can, and come up with a plan to meet again in 6 months at this
Yeah.
exact spot, don't they? I mean, look, as far as a plot goes, what is the plot of Before Sunrise? I don't think there is one. I don't think it's a kind of plot movie. It's just
Yeah,
a
you kind of just
relationship
explains the
development.
starting point, and then that's kind of all you can really do is say 2
Yeah,
people meet on a train and decide to spend the day together
yeah,
in Europe,
for
and
literally it. It is.
that's where you end the synopsis.
It's just a relationship development. So
Yeah,
all we can talk about over the course of this episode, I think, is how that relationship does develop
yeah.
and what we think about how that relationship does develop. Um, from that cynical point of view, I think it would be interesting to go in with that mindset, though, because you might view it you might view it just very, very differently in terms of what they are saying to each other.
Yeah.
Because if you're sincere about it, you have the space to then understand what they're trying to say to each other. Because I think Ethan Hawke does most of the talking in this movie, or the vast majority of the kind of waxing poetic in this movie.
Yeah, and it's funny that you talk about cynicism because I feel like she seems very kind of, charmed by him, taken aback by him,
Mm,
um, really into him and finds him incredibly interesting until he kind of throws in this American cynicism about things, and she kind
yeah,
of is a little bit put off. So in the
yeah,
moments when like when the fortune teller comes or the palm reader, and he just kind of has this attitude about it, and she kind of clocks him on it. And then I think even, oh, I'm trying to think of the other thing where he was very kind of cynical about it, and she kind of made a comment to him about him kind of scoffing it off. Um,
might have been the
and
poet, might have been the
Yes,
the
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 poet. Oh, yes,
Holmes
it was the
poet.
poet when, "Do you think he really wrote that on the spot, or did he just,
Yeah,
that's his poem that he uses for everyone, and he just throws the word in there." And her really kind of wanting to be wrapped up in the charm of this unique moment and this kind of creative thing that somebody does on the spur of the moment, but he and his American sensibilities can allow him to really be wrapped up in a bit of a fantastical moment. He has to kind of criticize it and throw this cynical
yeah,
realism onto it. And so I love that, she finds these interesting things about him and they're on this kind of really vibey wavelength until, she kind of learns more about him when he gets cynical about these things that, could be seen as a bit magical almost.
yeah. But I think that sort of stuff very much needed to happen in the movie because it would have almost felt a little too
False if it was so perfect the whole time. So yeah, I like that there are little
precise.
things
You
that
ended
help.
my sentence for me perfectly then, I'd like to
Yes,
point.
I mean, yes, I like the honesty in that things weren't exactly perfect, they weren't on the same wavelength, there was a bit of conflict there in small ways, and that, it kind of shows her as being maybe more of a dreamer and him being more of this realist. But then in meeting each other, they both kind of, um, partake in this in romantic fantastical concepts, and the fact that they really believe that they could maybe turn this into this epic love story between
Yeah.
the two of them. Um,
I mean,
and that they, all of this
this
kind
is
of
the thing
happened
about
for
it,
a
right?
reason and that kind of thing.
because this movie brings up so many concepts, it's almost difficult to know where to start in talking
Yeah.
about it, because it is constantly bringing up concepts of romance and concepts of love and things like that. And not just the one concept of love and romance, these little intricate concepts that come all within it. That
Yeah.
it is actually quite tough, because the movie doesn't have a plot. It is quite tough to almost grasp where to begin talking about this movie, which is why I'm trying to be a little bit more generalized about the kind of
Yeah.
attitude of the entire movie to begin with, because I think that's not a bad place to start a discussion on it with. But I feel as it keeps bringing up these things and these ideas and these and they're having these stunningly deep conversations with each other, but conversations that never feel pretentious. I think that's what I want to kind of hammer home about the movie as well. And I wasn't quite sure whether the movie was going to be this or not. I will admit, my mind is going in loops right now. It
Yeah.
really, really is. Because I'm trying to contend with what I thought the movie would be, what the movie ended up being, but then also what the movie may or may not be saying as well,
Yes.
and where that all fits in with what I thought it would be and what it ended up being in my mind. It's not confusing. Don't get me wrong.
No, it's
The
a pretty
movie is
straightforward
very
yes.
simple.
But the concepts that they're discussing, how they kind of go about getting to know each other, it has you kind of, not knowing where to start first in terms of what concepts and themes they discuss that you kind of want to touch on, I guess.
Yeah. Because I suppose so. So I'm kind of waiting for it to come naturally into the conversation,
Yeah,
and almost trying to find a way in what I'm saying to wedge
to
something
cl
in there.
yeah, to click.
But I suppose this is where I was trying to go with this cynical versus sincerity argument, which I know is I suppose is interesting to think about.
Yeah,
Yes, because not only can you, the viewer, watch it either way, then the characters can be either way about the whole situation as well.
yeah,
I think they're two of the most interesting characters you could possibly find in romance movies. And what I was talking about before, actually, what I briefly just mentioned with the movie never feeling pretentious despite its insistence on speaking conceptually and its insistence on behaving like every, postgraduate student,
yeah,
former student who's going on a summer trip across
across
Europe to
Europe.
find
Yeah,
themselves, or summer trip to Asia to find themselves, or that kind of mentality.
yeah,
You've got to give such credit to Linklater for writing this in such a way that it just doesn't come across as abhorrent almost to watch, to
yeah,
just see two of the most vomit-inducing, holier than thou people
yeah.
walking around with each other, going, "Oh, the greatness of the world and
Yeah,
romantic.
these kind of
We are like we are like
philosophizers.
we are like Percy and Mary Shelley." And like, you're not a
Yes.
philosopher,
They're not
you're not a
pretentious
poet,
characters. Yeah.
you're not that, but you're trying to understand these grander concepts. And that is exactly what I feel like I'm trying to understand now. Linklater's brought deep humanity to people that could have so easily been pretentious philosophical characters.
Yeah.
And that's such skill. That's such great writing. And I mean, Linklater's always been phenomenal at doing this kind of one day character piece, you know, sit them in a scenario for a particular length of
Yes,
time
and
and
let
just
them
watch
go.
them
Yeah,
speak. You know,
yeah,
he is the king of chill out movies almost, isn't he?
yeah.
And things like that. Dazed and Confused is one day let people
Yeah.
interact with each other.
I mean,
This
and
is
even these concepts of time and how people use it and what you can learn about somebody, the growth in them, the thoughts they have, how their thoughts can change over the course of time, however little or long it is.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
I mean, and I mean, it's one night. Is it like 14 hours or something like that? They
yeah,
end up
something like that.
spending together.
Mhm.
They meet on the train. They both, on a whim, decide to get off in Vienna because they've started a conversation about two German people that were arguing on the same carriage.
Yeah, and he was gonna, just spend the time he has some hours before his flight, so he was just gonna
Yeah,
walk around because he didn't have enough money for a hotel, so he was just gonna
Julie
spend
Delpy was going
the
back
whole.
home to Paris.
Yeah, so he was just gonna walk, and so he thought, "Well, it might be more interesting if I just walk with you. Would you wanna join
Yeah,
me and then just catch the later train to go back to Paris?"
yeah, and obviously, in terms of the connection, I think it starts off quite simple
Yeah.
and really does develop. And I don't think I can state enough. I think it is. I don't think it's recency bias saying this, and you know the kind of romance movies I also like are, do tend to be an older form of romance movie, which is the often feels this grandiose kind of passion, emotion, kind of
Yeah,
almost unspoken passion a lot. I love
yeah.
unspoken passion. A we spoke about the Passionate Friends on the main show
Mhm.
to end
Yes.
last series just last Friday, and we were speaking so much about Brief Encounter on that episode as well.
Yeah.
That it is those kind of romance. It is the now Voyager kind of romance where you
Yes,
don't even know if it
the quiet
actually can
character
happen,
focus. Yeah, yeah.
and everything goes unspoken. And that's maybe what my brain is not struggling with, but trying to compute, because Before Sunrise is that same concept of can this really happen? But it is the most let's speak to each other about it
Yes,
movie
let's get to
ever.
know as much about each other as possible, ask these deep questions
There's
and,
literally nothing that goes unspoken in this movie.
yes,
Everything
so,
is spoken
you
about.
know
Everything is thought through. Everything is philosophized
Yeah,
about.
and kind of how they go about finding things about each other, like, they start with these kind of deeper questions to kind of force each other to really delve deep into things in their past and things in their relationships, and then, from there, things kind of organically come out and they end up sharing and talking about, and I don't think it's even until very late in the story where Ethan Hawke reveals why he's really there and,
Yeah,
why he kind of avoided questions about, have you ever been in love and these kinds of things. So,
yeah.
yeah, they
I think if
start
the movie
out
does have
kind
a
of.
plot,
Yeah.
if the movie does have a is learning exactly why Ethan Hawke is there.
Yeah, and it's not for the pretentious reason that, you probably maybe
No.
went in thinking of, backpacking across Europe, blah, blah, blah. He was literally there to see his girlfriend who was there. And she ultimately kind of blew him off, and so he
Yeah.
decided to kind of, make a trip out of it for himself and do his own
Yeah, and
thing.
break it
So
off.
he Yeah, so he's kind of there under this maybe slightly heartbroken, aspect, and then, decides to just jump into this thing, because why
Yeah.
not? Yeah.
Because why not? Exactly. I mean, these characters are in their early 20s,
Yeah.
aren't they? They, yeah, have their whole life ahead of them, as the adage goes,
Yeah.
and very much act like that. I mean, I will ask you this question as well. It's not the profound question that comes from watching a movie like Before Sunrise. And while I may seem like my brain's being fried a little bit by trying to think about some of these concepts in a reasonably quick way to do a show on it,
Yeah.
um, I do want to reiterate just how great I think this movie is. I think this is a stunning movie. And I think it forces itself to be a stunning movie by having so much genuine humanity in there, where the characters are actually likable, that could have
Yeah.
so easily been unlikable. They
Yeah.
could have so easily been vomit-inducing, pretentious people.
Yeah, and, like yes, and even in the moments
They
where,
never are.
Ethan Hawke is being a bit, cynical with his attitudes and not really playing into kind of the charm of the moment. I love that she is honest enough to clock him on it so that,
Yeah.
it still makes him, we don't really lose likability for him. We kind of just see it as inherently almost an American kind of sensibility
Yeah.
to be that way.
And there is
A
that as well. There's that little playful back and forth because she's French and she speaks about being stereotyped as a kind of snooty French person.
Yes,
And
yeah,
I like
yeah.
those conversations that they have about their own
Exactly, and so
stereotype.
even yeah, so even in the things that kind of play into some, kind of negative sparks, I guess, between the 2 of them, that it
Yeah,
makes it not just a kind of a perfect thing throughout, they can still find a way to kinda talk through those things and joke about them, and so we're not really inherently disliking anybody for, how they react to things because they can talk through it.
yeah. I did want to ask. This was the question I did want to ask. Was at any point in the mid 90s was Ethan Hawke considered a particularly heartthrob figure? Because
Yes.
he seems like he would have been
No, he was.
around
He
this
he he
movie.
he definitely was. I think Reality Bites was the big one that had him be this
Okay.
kind of like, uh, aloof, cynical boyfriend kind of figure.
Yeah,
That was the movie that I think put him on the map to be this kind of heartthrob of a certain kind of, grungy era. And then this movie kind of helped perpetuate that as well. So, yeah, no,
yeah,
this was his kind of moment in the sun of heartthrobs of the time
yeah.
for that kind of pretentious,
Yeah, the
thoughtful,
philosophical type of person.
philosophical girl. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it works, right? I mean,
Mhm.
don't get me wrong. I think it's great to be philosophical. I think it's great to have interest in philosophy, but I think there is difference in having an interest in it and speaking about it to being what you've just referred to as a philosophy girl or a
Yeah,
philosophy guy
like
or
a
something
coffee
like that.
house like a coffee house poet type girl, you know?
Exactly. There is
He
a
was the
certain
heartthrob for the beret wearing
yes, I get
Junie
it.
Funny
I
from
get it.
Doug
I totally
style
get it.
girl. Yeah.
There is such a stereotype that I think follows these characters around in looking at them from the outside and in looking at this movie from the outside. And I don't know, did I want to watch it because I'd just been told it was a stunning romance movie? Did I want to watch it because I have seen the listening booth scene before and actually realize and watching it in context of the movie as well? I mean, it comes very, very early on. Um, they're in this record shop, they go into one of the listening booth, and it is just the most. I mean, this is what I adore about romance movies. This is
Yeah.
proper unspoken romance. They can't even look at each other. They're constantly missing each other's gaze. It lasts for
Yes.
ages.
These
It lasts
stolen
forever and
glances.
ever and ever.
Yeah.
Stolen glances. They can't. They never look each other in the eye. Once I was
Huddled
looking
up
out for it.
close in the corner. Yeah.
They're really tiny. There's little tiny little smiles that can just grow
Mhm.
and grow and grow on both their faces. The shyness, the nervousness. There's a little bit
Yeah.
of shaking. They haven't got a clue what to do with this energy that is currently in that tiny
Yes.
confined space.
Yes, but all before that, when they're out in the street walking, sitting on a bus or a train or something, they're confidently
Yeah,
conversing, really
yeah,
being bold in what they're sharing with each other, sharing deep memories and secrets and all kinds of things. And then when they're in this tiny confined space, listening, not really needing to talk is when they get kind of the most shy and nervous and
yeah.
innocent and share these little cute
Everything.
glances. Yes, in the most intimate of moments is when they kind of aren't
Yeah,
as confident as they are when they are talking, because the same thing kind of happens in that gondola when they kind of go up,
yeah.
and he gets
Yet I
really
think,
shy in asking her for a kiss.
yeah. Yet I think, these intimate moments are when they are the most nervous and shy, yes. Yet I think they are 100% the most romantic moments in the entire movie,
Yeah.
because that is true love that I have just witnessed on the screen. That's the closest to my understanding and to my own
Yeah.
personal feelings. I've just witnessed two other people fall in love with each other
Yeah.
without saying a word. I, you know, I know how that goes. I'm just saying I have just witnessed two other people doing it,
Yeah.
you know, and recognizing that, seeing that scene in context of the whole movie was a beautiful experience to watch. I
Yeah.
really, really do think it was. I honestly think it is just the purest form of true energy affection, a presence of a magnetism
Yeah.
almost that I've only seen in, I would say, two other movies, one of which is Brief Encounter, one of which is now Voyager, and
Yeah.
they are a far different style of movie, both of them, to something like Before Sunrise that is far more philosophical than either of those two,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
makes
and
you think about more of those concepts, forces you to think about them more.
yeah, it's almost more romantic when you can just kind of fill the silence with somebody and not have to say
Yeah,
anything. Yeah, and we get some really great moments that really feel electric between the two of them when, they're when we see them talking, they're kind of frantically talking and they're excited and they're covering all these topics all in like one little span of a moment. And then, we kind of stop for a minute and get these really quiet scenes between the two of them, and those are
yeah,
kind of the sweetest scenes in the whole film.
yeah. They really are, and I think there's such weight to that.
Yeah.
It's something I like. Shared silence with someone you're comfortable with, I think, is the best thing.
Yeah.
Um, so seeing that in this movie just felt good. It
Yeah.
felt beautiful to watch.
Yeah.
Um, and I loved it. You get it in that listening booth scene. You get it in the Ferris wheel as well. Yeah, when they have that first big kiss, and you are constantly wondering, well, where's it going to go? He has
Yeah.
this
How
plane
could
to catch. He has to get back
just to
home.
go back.
That
Yeah, how are they gonna
there's
make anything
no
of this?
option,
Yeah,
and
but
they're
then that also
constantly
plays.
telling each other. I adore that they're constantly telling each other about all these other instances they've come across in their own lives of people in quote unquote long-term relationships. And remember, this is 1995. There's no
Yeah.
video calling and all that kind of stuff, really,
Yeah.
is there?
Yeah.
There's none of that. You have to write
Cell
to people.
phones and yeah,
You
as we
can't
know
really
them
do
now.
you can't really do long distance cell phones that easily,
Yeah,
can
because
you?
this was the thing where, like, not everyone had a cell phone. Like,
Well,
yeah.
exactly. You would literally have to write letters as though it was the 40s. It was the same, you know.
Yeah.
So you might have all this modernization around you and see it and recognize it and speak about it to each other and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. But the logistics of keeping it up aren't there. I think it's easier to be in a long-term relationship now than it probably ever has been for people that
Yeah.
are in a long-term relationship. I
Mhm.
don't know, but I would imagine it is. Um, because you have such connectivity with everybody. Um, but it's not the case for Celine and whatever Ethan Hawke's name is. It was just Ethan Hawke. It's just Ethan Hawke. What's his name?
Jesse. Yeah.
Jesse.
Like, he said
It's
his name is
literally just
James,
Ethan
but
Hawke.
people call him Jesse. And then she's like
That's
like, "Jesse
yeah.
James?" He's like, "No."
Well, it's exactly like Jesse James because it's a stupid little joke, but it's literally just Ethan Hawke. But there's not. So you are quite sad, and I think there's a great deal of bittersweetness that comes with Before Sunrise as well, because you are so into them as a couple. You are so into this relationship. You're spending so much intimate time with them because the movie doesn't give you anybody else to spend any time with at all.
Yeah.
You're just
It's very
constantly with these people
contained.
for an hour and 45 minutes and
Yes, it's
nobody
very
else.
concentrated and intimate with these two characters, and so they really have to, the film has to really fabricate some interesting conversations for you to stick with them, and it does.
Yeah.
It gives you some really great moments, some really real moments, and when we're not listening to them converse, we're watching them enjoy beautiful places. So
Yeah.
there's always kind of something to fill your brain throughout this day with them. But before we continue even further, we do have something that we have to do.
I got very excited. I do
Yes, and I
apologize.
did not wanna interrupt because the point of this show is getting your perspective on these films that you're watching for the very first time. So I didn't want to interrupt your thought as you said you wanted to kind of come to these things organically as we had this conversation. So I didn't want to stop you in your tracks on that. But yes, we do have to say a huge thank you to our It's a Wonderful Podcast patrons, as we do every week on an episode of one of the shows. Usually we tend to I think we're getting later and later into doing it, but we're doing it. So
Whenever it comes up in the conversation.
Yes. So we did not want to miss saying thank you to our It's a Wonderful Podcast patrons.
Certainly not. Certainly not. Forgive my mind for wanting to crack on with the movie, because it is such a thoughtful movie, and again I want to reiterate that I think I'm only taking so much time to try and think about what I'm saying because I believe the movie deserves that care and attention from me.
Yes.
I believe the movie deserves that dedication from me because I believe the movie's that good to deserve that. It's that interesting, fascinating, just so deeply emotionally thoughtful and beautiful that you can't just come in all guns blazing on a movie like this. You have to sit with it. I almost regret not watching it with a few days of time in between our scheduled recording for this episode. And having allowed it to sit with me, because I may think differently about some of the elements of it in 2 or 3 days' time, as it continues to ponder around my mind. But it is one of those movies, and that's what, I want to make clear in this episode. It is one of those movies that does do that. It is a fascinating piece. It is what I wanted it to be. I think it's pretty exactly what I wanted it to be. And I didn't go in with any story concept, or I didn't go in with any plot concept, or how any of this would all end up. I went in with an attitude idea. I went in with what is the feeling of this movie going to be? What is the feeling of this movie going to be? I love feelings of movies more than anything else. That is what I focus on, these big picture things.
Well, yeah, which is also why I think it would work for you, because it's not really like a plot-driven film, because you're not a plot-driven kind of person. You like to see kind of the art of a thing, or the look of a thing, or the feeling.
Don't get me wrong. I love a good messy plot every now and again, though.
Yes, but I mean, that is never kind of your major focus. Like, where I'm always kind of like, I want to know the story and how it goes and where it ends up, and my mind is kind of subconsciously trying to figure it out. You're just kind of along for the ride and just letting the visuals kind of to paint the picture for you as it comes along. And this movie is kind of perfect for that.
Yeah, it really is, because I mean, look, the visual of it is very, very soft as well. It's incredibly softly shot. There's nothing harsh remotely about it. But for God's sake, before we start talking any more, We
Patrons,
must
we love
thank
you. I swear.
We do love the patrons. We seriously do. If of course you want to join us on the Patreon or donate in any way, there are links in the description to do that. The least everybody deserves is a big thank you, even when my brain is mushed. Everybody deserves a big thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you, of course, to start us off, to Adam Witt.
And thank you, Michael Smith.
Thank you to Abby Friel.
And thank you, Ferris Muthana.
Thank you to Jeannine's big brother Justin, 90s Comics Box.
Thank you, Tina Farrow.
Thank you to Marcus Burton.
Thank you to A Movie Fanobi Steve.
Thank you to Samir Tesfaye.
And thank you, Patrick Harden.
Thank you to Carla Feast.
And thank you to the great Ken Knapsack.
Thank you to Tom and Kimber of the Odd Shape channel.
Thank you, Eric Garcia.
And thank you, of course, to Billy Polahan. And a late applause for the patrons and great applause for the movie as well. I mean, don't just make this all about me, though. I know this is Morgan hasn't seen, and I tend to explain things till I'm, blue in the face and dry in the mouth. But I want to hear what you have to say about this as well. I mean, what is going through your mind in watching this movie as opposed to it just being a modern Roman holiday?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's the biggest concept and takeaway for me throughout this film because, as I said, I am someone who kind of likes to look ahead. So while I think this is a film maybe for the first time where I maybe wasn't doing that because I was really caught up in the concept that I related to in terms of doing something spontaneously because you just have this guttural, strong ache that if you don't do it, you're going to have this regret about it.
Yeah.
And so I'm just kind of going on the ride. And so, yeah, my biggest kind of takeaway is that this is kind of one of few films where I'm not constantly looking ahead. I'm kind of in it with these characters who are just kind of really enjoying this moment. And if nothing else, if it doesn't work out, they will have this beautiful memory to live off of. Because I think even Jesse says it at the beginning, he kind of talks about already setting up and establishing that they're not going to end up together, and like he's doing her this favor for her future husband so that she'll know that if she went off with that kind of kind of cool guy for that one day, she'll get it out of her system and then she won't need to know if she missed out on anything once she finds her actual husband. So he already
it's a
kind of
fascinating thing to think about, really, isn't it?
So he kind of like cleverly and coolly like tries to say, hey, if you come with me, I don't have an agenda because I'm already telling you right now that we're not going to end up together. So
I mean, it's a real smooth talker.
It's going to be just this fun experience that you can have to know that you didn't miss out on something. So that also kind of just hammers that idea home for me of, just jumping into something because you might have a regret about it and you'll always have kind of that memory. And it's just a concept that I really love.
And the movie hammers home the message of positivity in doing that, regardless of whether you end up staying together or not. Having that experience is the most important thing that this movie is telling you to do. And I've seen that it comes from the fact that Linklater himself had this kind of experience with somebody. Where it was just, he was in a city for a finite amount of time with a completely random woman who he never ever saw again. And obviously that's going to have some sort of effect on you.
I mean, yes, and the fact
had a positive effect on him to make
that
this movie where it has a positive effect on the characters and presents it in a positive way.
It stayed with you.
Thing.
Yes, it's not something that you write off or feel upset about or feel like it was a waste of your time. You really just take in this as something that enriched your life in some way, and not everything needs to continue. And it just also plays into his seeming interest in the concepts of time and how people spend it and how people lose it and how people use it. And this being this really beautiful illustration of using your time to its best, at its best. So I loved the illustration of using time, in a way where people might not think it's wisely, but this film, taking the time to show us that this was an
Well,
experience both of them needed at this particular
yeah.
time.
Well, I suppose that's a good question as well. Not just in the overarching sense, so because I think the answer to my question would be a yes in that sense of, do they use their time well? Yes, because they clearly have great love for each other by
Yeah.
the end of their day together,
Yeah.
and do make this promise to meet again at the exact same spot in 6 months, which they have to quickly figure out exactly when that was
How they're gonna do that.
gonna be,
Yeah.
because you can't just say that and go, wait a minute, what day is it? I've forgotten. And then you're lost because you're a day too late, a day too early. You don't know what month it is.
Yeah.
Whatever, you're traveling across Europe randomly. Ethan Hawke, he probably doesn't know what day it necessarily is, at this point. So I like that they kind of have to humorously figure out exactly when this day in 6 months will be.
Yeah.
And who knows what happens? I don't know what happens. If you've watched Before Sunset and Midnight, you know what happens, but I don't.
Yeah.
I don't know what happens at this point. As far as I'm concerned, I think you can watch Before Sunrise as a movie on its
As a
own.
one-off thing, yeah, and just know
Which
these
is why
people
the
had this beautiful
sequels,
experience, and yeah.
I suppose it's why the sequels come so far apart from each other. And again, this is Linklater playing with time, isn't it? He grows with these movies. Like, he made Boyhood over the space of 14 years or something, didn't he?
Yes, and I'm someone who didn't really care for Boyhood. Like,
But what
I
a
respected
fascinating thing to do.
I respected the concept of it. It was very fascinating that he took this time to make this film over these several years with the same cast and all of this and tell this continuous story. I thought that was a really cool concept, but it just didn't resonate with me, and, where, you know, the conversations had in this film and just the use of how these characters spent their time felt more interesting.
Yeah.
It didn't really feel very interesting to me with the characters in Boyhood.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, going back to my question that I wanted to ask, don't think about it in an overarching sense, because I think it's a simple answer. Do you believe they used their time well?
Yes.
How?
I mean, they spent a lot of time getting to know each other and even just doing it in a very formulaic way at first, and then almost dropping that at a certain point and just letting the conversation flow naturally, which I think it's even better and easier, and you get a sense of a person's personality and their way of thinking when it's not so kind of structured around this kind of back and forth question answer vibe.
Yeah.
They were constantly on the move, walking and seeing places and kind of getting a feel of what the other sees as beautiful or what attracts the other person in things out in the world. They took time to really be humorous with each other. They really took their time with the romantic moments and really kind of
Yeah.
cherished those and made those very precious. I think that's ultimately why she makes the decision to not sleep with him.
Yeah.
Because I think she wanted to keep those moments really sacred and maybe not make it into this tawdry kind of one night stand kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because I think even, she wants to keep it as pure as possible because even after they share their first kiss, he thinks she's going in for like another kiss, but she just goes and hugs him,
Mm.
and holds him close for a beat. So I
It's this
think
very
she
singular thing. I think particularly
Yes,
with Celine, it is this very
wanting to
singular thing.
keep this experience incredibly pure and
Yeah,
honest.
she is the more, I suppose, reserved one of the two, isn't
Yeah.
she? Ethan Hawke is kind of a little bit all guns blazing.
Well, yeah, I mean, even how she describes the 2 of them when she kind of talks about herself and her demeanor and how she views the world as being almost like an old lady, and him kind of
Yeah,
a little bit wild and kind of flighty and excitable like a little boy.
yeah,
And
yeah.
those 2 dynamics really kind of coming together in a
It,
strange
it,
way.
it
Yeah.
that is definitely the relationship dynamic there. He's the one running around quick in a circle
Yeah.
to her standing in the middle of him running around in a circle
Yeah.
going, please stop running around in
Just
a
calm
circle.
down. It's okay.
I'm
Yeah.
tired. You know, that
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
And I quite like that as a relationship dynamic. However, I almost like it better when it's reversed in that way. I like the kind of manic, yeah, I suppose manic's the wrong word, but excitable woman. If it's a hetero
Okay.
relationship,
Yeah.
obviously, in this
Yeah.
sense, where this is a movie about hetero relationships. I don't know what a before sunrise about gay relationships, about any sort of other area of
Yeah.
human relationships is. I have no idea what that looks like at the moment. This is we're talking
Yeah.
about this very
What
specific
you can
form.
relate to in terms of yeah.
Yeah. But I like that. I like that dynamic. I think it kind of works when you have an excitable person and a less excitable and a reserved person almost.
Yes, and I like that she kind of because we've seen like little bits of that throughout the day, and so then I like in this moment she kind of puts that label on it for us, and we
Yeah.
kind of sit and think, yeah, that's kind of
I mean,
exactly perfect.
I'm not
So
saying it's the only thing that can work. Of course, it's not. There's so many
yeah,
things
but
that can work.
it's a dynamic that really does work. Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many things of that type that can work. I would agree with you when you say I think they use their time well. If there was anything missing from this movie for me,
Okay.
and this is, what is a perfect movie? I think I've stated enough that I think this is a wonderful, wonderful movie, and a
Yeah.
really, really one that will stick with me, one that will continue to stick with me, and one that I will want to revisit. And can't wait to revisit, or can't wait to rethink about in
Yes,
watching
and
Sunset and
revisit these
Midnight.
characters. Yeah.
Yeah. I would have liked to see them go through an experience together that
Okay.
isn't of their doing.
Okay.
Like, something happens that they have to mutually deal with.
Okay.
Like, like in Roman Holiday, when there's a bit of like, they have to go on a bit of a run from people,
Yeah.
and the police are after them a bit,
Yeah.
and it's like that.
Or
There's
even in
none of that.
Dogfight when there's the whole contest, the ugly girl
Yeah,
contest, and they have to kind of
yeah,
re-navigate and figure out how to come back together after, that
yeah.
hurt that was caused from that situation.
Exactly, exactly. There's none of that in Before
Yeah.
Sunrise. It is so low stakes in terms of anything but what they're feeling towards each
Yeah.
other. There's nothing to ever take them out of any conversation about what they're feeling to each other and what
Yeah.
they're feeling around each other. And I think I might have just needed. This is just me. I don't know if anybody else thinks this way. I'd be fascinated to find out. I think I just needed, in order for me to make it, or in order for the movie to make me feel like the two of them could work after this movie, I needed to see them for 10 minutes not think about their own feelings towards each other and just be with each other
Okay.
dealing with something else.
Okay. I get that.
Because that I think is when you really find out about, if you can
Yeah, like
go
a
around
deeper
with this
level of
person.
character with the person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you can't just be there for an entire relationship going, well, what do you think about the stars? I think that star up there, it just looks so beautiful. It
Yeah.
reminds me of the glint in your eye, and the glint in your eye shines on your shoe, and your shoe is so wonderful. You can't be like that all the time.
Yes. So if there was a little bit of something that would have kind of maybe helped them have to kind of navigate through, I think that probably would have brought them even closer and maybe understood each other on a deeper level.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah,
Exactly.
no, I get that.
There's no relationship conflict in the movie other than there may be relationship conflict in the trilogy. There may very well be. I am somewhat expecting that because I think that's how story goes, right?
Yeah.
But I really don't know in me saying that. But there's no relationship concept conflict in this movie. It is literally the only conflict is can they really stay together?
Yeah.
That's it. And if you want to believe they can, they do. If you just watch this movie, like if you want to believe, they do. If you don't want to believe, they don't. It's
Yeah.
purely up to you. Yet I think if there's a direct conflict that forces them to deal with something and they come through that,
Mhm.
then I don't think there's any argument for the don't. Or I think
Yeah.
there's far less of an argument for the don't because going through something together brings people together.
Yeah.
It is not just this attachment that you find with somebody. That's there, obviously it is.
Yeah.
Find the attachment. We all find attachment with people of various relationships in our lives, don't we?
Yeah.
Romantic and otherwise. Find the attachment, but it is only when you go through something. This is why everybody says, like, go on holiday with your partner. That's when that's when you really
That's
know
when
if
you
you
really
want to stay
find
with
out.
them,
Yeah.
right? That's why people
Yeah.
say that because you need to go through something that
Yeah.
might doesn't always have to,
Yeah,
but
take you out of
might
your
take you
everyday,
out of just your
Yeah.
everyday. Yeah,
Yeah.
you need that,
Yeah.
but it didn't have that, and I think if there's anything missing, it is that.
It might be something, yeah, I didn't really think about that. Because again, like, the pureness of this day, is kind of the focus, and so, uh,
Yeah,
having that lack of conflict just makes it feel very easy for them to kind of feel the things that they're feeling.
I mean the movie didn't want that. The movie wanted to be what it was, and the movie is absolutely
And it
perfect at
works.
displaying
Yeah.
what it wants to display. 100% it is. This is me philosophizing in my own
Mhm.
way about the concepts of love
It's
and
something you would have liked
relationships,
to see. Yeah. Yeah.
which
Yeah.
this movie wants you, the viewer, to think about the concepts of love and relationships and how, Jesse and Celine, how you can identify with them or not
Yeah.
identify with them and why.
Yeah.
And if that has brought up in me a need to say, well, I can, but go through something together.
Yeah. It will
Um,
tell you a lot
then that's
more
what it
about a
has done.
person.
And
Yeah.
I think if Linklater was here, he'd be happy with that because I'm thinking
Fair.
about his movie, and that's
Yes.
probably all he wants.
Fair.
You know,
Yeah.
it is not a nitpick. It is not a negative.
No,
It
it's
is simply
I
a
think it's a
thought.
fair I think it's a fair point, and I think it's an interesting way to really, uh, get people to know each other on a more real level, when they go through something together. So, yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
it's a fair thing to say you would have liked to see.
yeah. I mean, do we have anything else more to say about Before Sunrise? It is truly a simple movie that
Yeah.
we have spoke conceptually enough about. I think our feelings towards it are pretty clear.
Yeah.
Um, I'm looking forward to Before Sunset. It comes 9 years after Before
Yeah.
Sunrise, and I
So
think
did they meet?
Midnight comes 9 years again, doesn't it?
I think so. Yeah.
It's 2013, I think, Before Midnight. Um, did they meet again after that 6 months? What's happened? Where are they? Who knows? I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know at this point. You know, Jeannine, you're keeping your cards close to your chest, but I imagine you're very excited too.
Yeah, it's been a minute since I've seen it, so yeah.
Do you have anything more to say about Before Sunrise?
No, just really nice to revisit this film and kind of recapture that thought of really, focusing on wanting to create a memory, whether, it ends out good or bad, you're creating a moment that you're always going to have, and maybe that means more than what the future holds in that moment.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So many interesting things to think about as we lead on in, but what a great way to start the series, of course,
Yeah.
with the only movie possible, because this is the Before Trilogy series that we're doing. We just happen to be lumping in Linklater's latest movie into the end of it, because there wasn't just 3 weeks in February.
Yeah.
That's the only reason, really, that we're doing it. And Linklater doesn't have an enormous filmography, does he? That I haven't seen. I think the only one I actually haven't seen is his latest one, which is Hitman.
Yeah.
From 2023, I think.
That was from last year, I think.
From last year, is it 24?
Is it 24?
No, it's 2025 now. It's 2025 now.
I know. I'm just I'm just thrown off with time.
I think
Time
it's
is not.
2023, if I remember rightly. But it'll be interesting, and I'm looking forward to the rest of this series. Of course, it isn't the only show we have on this podcast feed, though. The main show, It's a Wonderful Podcast, is there, celebrating old movies every week on a Friday. A world of whimsy and fantasy is coming up throughout February on that show. Exciting times indeed. Subscribe, of course, to the podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts, on the main podcast feed, major platforms, and all that sort of stuff. My words are going all over the place. I'm thinking too much about concepts of relationships. I'm all messed up.
So deep.
Subscribe and ding the notification bell on the It's a Wonderful Podcast YouTube channel, of course, as well, for all the fun stuff we do have there. We spoke about the Patreon and donation links before. They are in the description if you want to support us in that way. You can, of course, also find us on social media, on the app formerly known as Twitter, at It's a Wonderful One, on Blue Sky at It's a Wonderful One as well. You can find me on the app formerly known as Twitter at The Purple Dawn, with a 3 instead of the E in the because, Jeannine.
3 is the magic number.
On Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky at The Purple Dawn. All your romantic things somewhere.
You can find me, Jeannine _ on Twitter, Jeannine on Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. If you want any merch for any of our shows, just check the description for the link or search G9 Design on tpublic.com. And if you want to purchase any of my art in print form, you can find that at my Big Cartel shop, g9design.bigcartel.com.
Well, there we go. There is indeed only one thing left to do. And in your finest French accent, in honour of Julie Delpy, please, Jeannine.
Toi?
Yes.
You?
Close enough. Close enough. The French would take. We'll take it. Bye.
Au revoir.
Au revoir. There you go. Oh, yes.